All right, it's a beautiful October day, and I'm grateful that this Academic Service Committee team is here. I'm excited to share some of the great things that have been happening in the world of academics. But before we get started, let's just go around the room and introduce ourselves again. So, I'm Stacia Studer, and I serve as Assistant Superintendent of Academics and Educational Services. Start this way, Becky.
I'm Becky Dunn. I'm Director of Communications and Community Relations.
Ashley McGinnis, Superintendent. Kara Anderson, Director of Special Programs.
Katie Reed, Director of Secondary.
Tamara Wagner, Missouri Western.
Michelle Schultz, ELD Coordinator.
Mike Levins, representing community from outside.
Deanna Duval, Coordinator of Early Childhood Education.
Mackenzie Norton, community member of Mosaic.
Cassandra Gill, Community Member of Mosaic as well.
Kim Miller, Board.
Sam Davis, Coordinator of College and Career Readiness and Family Services for the district.
In one breath.
In one breath, get better.
Seems to me like you do more than anybody.
No, sir.
Oh, yes, she does.
Nancy Gregory, community member. Kim DeRue, community member.
Reba Kendall, community member.
Tom Richmond, Board Member.
Lacey Adams, Director of Elementary Education.
Donna Baker, Board Secretary.
Yay. I'm so grateful that you're here to talk about academics. It's one of my favorite subjects. Committee members, I provided for you guys, this will be our binder. So this will be I call it a liberal goal binder. We're going to keep adding it to it all year. I know last time I gave you a 5-folder. This is something that we did in our Instructional Leaders Network, and we'll continue this process with this team if that works. So if you open up your binder, the first thing you're going to find are the goals of the District Academic Committee meeting that was presented in September, along with kind of those professional commitments. And I always am a big champion of PLCs, and so I'm just going to remind us of our professional commitments. Students first, always. Keep student learning growth and equity at the center of our decisions. We're going to honor time. Like a good teacher, I always overplan. I'm hoping that we can get to what we want to get to today, but 3 to 4 o'clock is that time. Please, I want you to engage. I want you to have dialogue. I want you to be solution-oriented in this work. Frame those challenges as those opportunities, and really let's stay focused on what are those actionable steps that you feel that we can take back to our team to grow. And the last one is, this is a collective responsibility. Our academic service team are superstars. Every single person I work with day in and day out is advocating and transforming teaching and learning in the St. Joseph School District. They give 110% to everything that they do, and I'm grateful for the team that I serve right along. What you'll find on the next page I presented also is our academic service plan. And I know Dr. McGinnis presented it as an informational item, the CSIP. This really drills down. The CSIP's like it can have facilities, it can have all the things. So really I wish we could prioritize everything, but if you prioritize everything, you're not prioritizing anything. And there are certain things that you have to prioritize. And so this really centers down what are the 3 things as an academic service team in the July meeting, our superintendent's cabinet said, hey, these are things that you can work on. And then we sat down just as a collective group and said, we're going to tackle these things. We're going to go with these things. Today, specifically, what I'm going to talk about is goal number 1. And in that goal, in our academic plan, is really that by the end of 25-26 school year, the district will see an increase of percentage of students performing at the proficient advanced levels. Really, you guys, I could go across the board and say those numbers again, but 38% in all the core subjects right now. We've always said we'd like to hit 45 is our goal. And so we're calling this Project 45 right now. In language, arts, math, and science, this progress will be monitored quarterly through grade level assessments, and that's where we are right now. Our elementary teams are monitoring their instruction right now, what's happening in the classroom, and I'm going to walk you through what that looks like. And we lead data conversations. So when we get that data back, you can't sit on it. You know you have an issue, you have to target where supports are needed. And those data conversations with district and building leaders, classroom teachers, bringing in classroom teachers and talking, help us problem solve, what do you need to be successful? And then if there's support staff, if there's tier 2 and tier 3 support that a child needs, we want to make sure that they get that support. And then ensure that we're on that pace to be 45 as a district. So I am going to turn your attention because in the PLCs, we always start with data first. And I told you the last time we met that we had looked at the district overall. And I shared this in August with our building leaders. I shared this with department chairs. I shared this at the Board of Information. I want everybody to be informed of where we are, building by building. And so what you'll see here, this is the St. Joseph School District proficiency trends in each of the content areas between the years of 2023 and 2025. And so what I did was I went into DESE and through their portal and I pulled the data according to core subject and look at it from a building perspective. Where is that building according to English language arts, math and science, social studies at the high school level? And so right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to quit talking. I'm going to let you process this data. And what you'll find is I just want to walk you through. So this is the English language arts, and you can see those numbers. 2023 we're at 36.5%, and then you'll see where we were in 2024, and then you'll see where we were in the spring of this past year, so for 2025. The same thing follows through with each of our buildings. The next page, the second page is mathematics. The third page is science, and on the back of science you're going to find social studies because again, in social studies, we only have the government assessment. I'm going to set the timer for about 5 minutes. I just want you to study it, look at it, think through, and then we'll collaborate around this data. It's just a professional commitment to the 3 To find a stopping point, in your binder, you're gonna find a yellow sheet. Will you pull that yellow sheet out? This will be our thinking and reflection page. And we're gonna look at 3 areas today. Really, we're looking from at a systems level, a big level. I don't want to call out any school or any particular site, but I do want to draw into the fact of what are key strengths that you see that are emerging at a systems level, and then where do you see the most significant opportunities for improvement at the systems level? So where do you notice that there's an opportunity for us to grow? So for example, I'm going to start out just so that you can kind of see. One of the key strengths that are emerging at a systems level is that we have a 7.6% growth in mathematics within the 3-year. One of the areas that I see that is a most significant opportunity for improvement in the systems level, and it's not just because I'm a former English teacher or anything, is that we started the year 2023 at 36.5%, and then at the end of the spring, we were at 38%. And so for as much energy as that we're putting into literacy, we're not seeing the growth that we had hoped to see just yet. Anybody from the team want to share any noticings? Carrie Anderson usually is really good at taking some notes here. Carrie, do you mind kind of taking some notes for our team?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anybody from the committee want to share anything that they see that are strengths?
My initial observation was at your junior high and high school levels, for the most part, you saw growth across the board. All 4 junior highs, middle schools, however we want to call them, in all areas showed growth. And I think with the exception of maybe 2 areas at the high school level, slight decline for both of them, but for the most part growth, as opposed to the elementary schools where kind of all over the place a little bit. So what is happening at that higher level that's showing continued improvement as opposed to the younger?
Thank you, Michael, for sharing.
That's just the observation. But
Yeah,
especially that middle school. I mean, like I said, across the board, in every subject, all 4 schools showed growth from 20 last year to this year.
Thank you. Cassie?
I noticed overall throughout the district over the last 2 years, 3 years, we've had steady improvement in mathematics. I asked last time about the data by building, but I guess maybe, I also have questions about certain years, what our percent of staff turnover was that year compared to scores the following year. I was pretty surprised at not the last board meeting, but the meeting before that, when you mentioned that 66.6, I think it was, percent, two-thirds of our elementary teachers are first or second year. The buildings, what buildings are primarily first, second year teachers and which ones have more tenure and how that affects scores across the board? I don't know if we could get that information.
That's, in one of my sleeping moments as I was laying down, one of the key things that I really wanted to do some correlation work with is almost like years of experience at each building. And I think that would, I asked HR just this morning for that information.
Okay.
Can you break down the average number of years per building that an educator in that building has served in education for us? And so Brandy in the HR department is getting us that information right now. But yes, I would love to bring that back and see, is there, of course, there's probably, you're going to see a correlation there. But I believe in evidence and leading with evidence, and I just want to speak to that. Thank you for sharing that. Yes.
What's going on with Edison? They're really improving. Is there something different there?
Yeah, she's not here, but I'm going to speak to Tabitha. Tabitha's leadership has been instructionally based, and she's really been the catalyst for, I'm going to use this, it's data-driven instruction, and we call it DDI here. It's really about bringing results to the table, sharing with teachers those results, and then talking to the teachers about what coaching moves they need to make, what practice changes they need to make. I'm glad you brought that up, Kim. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great point.
Yeah, they've done great.
Yeah.
Really improved.
Any last strengths that overarching that you see? So I'm gonna go, oh, sorry, go ahead.
One quick comment is, and this isn't completely true, but we show improvement in a lot of areas, but we showed some dipping generally in 24, even compared to 23. And so you have a year that slips down, then it's harder to make that higher goal. And so, you know, it looks like a lot of the places have done some improvement, but something happened in 24 that overall we didn't make the progress that we probably would have hoped we did.
That was my thought about the turnover, as I was wondering, was 24 a high, like was 23 a high year for turnover, and then 24 we had some newer teachers or something along those
Yeah,
lines.
that's probably a better way of saying it. They just looked at that to me, and that kind of stuck out to me. And, you know, that's not true in every school or every number, but in general, there was some slippage in 24.
Thank you for saying that, Mr. Richmond. Carol, do you make sure to get that as an opportunity for us to look at and study? And Mr. Richmond already went there, but let's think of opportunities for growth, because that's where my mind goes. It's like, how can we grow? Like, where do you see, I've studied this, our team has studied it, we would like your insight on where do you see that are opportunities for growth?
Well, one of the areas that appears to me is that we have some areas that have best practice. Their scores are fairly consistently high. And so instead of feeling like we've got to go out completely and benchmark against other people in other places, we have some opportunity internally to take a look at what are the things that are happening that are bringing that improvement about, and then right here in our own district. And what are the things that are causing that to happen? I appreciate what you said about Edison, the leadership factor. But anyway, that's something I think we could take a look at.
Oh, well, Mark,
Yes.
Lindbergh and science. I mean, they really improved, I guess, major improvement.
Thank you for saying that, Kim. We worked really hard last year with that Lindbergh 5th grade team. We had a teacher there, and I'm going to show you in a bit, but we led a new assessment protocol for science last year. There's a platform called Master Connect. And so it was some internal monitoring that happened, and you'll see an example, but we gave a predictive assessment that mimicked the math. Once we got that data back, we intervened. And so we got the data initially, we looked at the data and said, oh, there's a gap here. And so that teacher, myself, and an instructional coach, sometimes we had to meet through Zoom, you know, because we're all in different places, but we kept connecting with that teacher to bring up best practices. The instructional coach, of course, worked through the classroom and helped support that individual, but it paid off.
Yeah,
It paid
that's
off.
it.
Yeah.
It does look like in the science, in the high schools, that's huge. So is that sort of what you're talking about?
Well, and I'm going to speak to the high school, Ms. Miller, so that you're just in the know. When I entered this role, it was interesting to me that we offered biology at freshman year.
Right.
And that's such a transitional year for high school students. You're coming into high school, you're trying to fit in. On top of that, you're probably taking an Algebra 1 exam, and then we were also given the biology exam. And in discussions with science teachers and our instructional coaches, they felt they weren't quite ready to take that bio test. And I don't know about you guys, but I always took biology at sophomore year. Many districts, when I contacted, offered biology the sophomore year. So under Dr. McGinnis's leadership, we restructured the whole science department. And we put physical science as a freshman, and then moved biology up for the majority of the students. So we're seeing what you see here is probably not going to happen next year, because what transitioned is a student can move into biology their freshman year if they have the skills necessary to get in there. And so we tested only the students that had those skills necessary to be in the course. Biology, though, is a required course by the state. Everybody has to take biology. It's part of the high school diet, is what I call. And so you're going to see probably some recorrection on our high school science. This is probably a one-year thing. And I'm
recall
grateful.
talking about that
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
It was a big thing.
But I'm grateful you brought that up so I can speak to it. You know, it's those systems things. It's a system, and it paid off for us.
It did.
And in fact, if I looked at the MPI and our APR results, our science may be the one to carry us forward this year. That's what I'm very hopeful about.
Well, I appreciate that explanation because my comment was going to ask, or I was going to ask, why is biology, wow, like
Yeah.
what happened?
Yeah.
I mean, I know you started out with overall, the science has really increased.
Yeah.
And so that explains why that biology has really like doubled.
And Nancy, I'm glad you brought that up too, because there was a lot invested into the biology program. So I'm thankful that the community supported a STEM initiative with the bond. And so we got like updated microscopes and things that kids never had access to before in our science classrooms. And we also piloted a core resource. And so we provided, because if you talk to the science teachers, they were using kind of whatever they wanted to use to support those standards. And I believe in high quality resources in front of our kids. In that process, we piloted at the high school level a targeted approach of biology, and everybody, no matter what school you were in, had access to the resource. At Benton, Central, and Lafayette, and so biology teachers across the district were using the same core resource. And so we're trying to mimic a little bit of that. If you like, an opportunity for growth for me is the social studies right now, and looking at that number. I want engaged citizens. It's part of our disposition of a portrait of a graduate work, and we are leading up a high, we're piloting currently a government resource to support government teachers.
I'm an engineer by degree, so it's impossible for me not to look at math. And my explanation of math appears to be that a lot of people take Algebra 1. Students that are more proficient in math are the ones that go on to Algebra 2. And so algebra, you see a big jump and a big improvement. But it is a little bit indicting that Algebra 1 kind of lags there.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like that'd be a place to consider, is there a different strategy or timing relative to Algebra 1? Because math is it's just an important item that we don't get people through and give up on it, you know, and have them give up on it. So
a lot of research points that Algebra 1 is that gateway to college. That the students, you know, ready to undertake college courses, and so that's where we've really targeted. I can't speak enough to the work of Colin Pettigrew and Victoria Mueller. They are instructional coaches, and they have been in that work in those classrooms with those Algebra 1 teachers. And I know it's not the numbers that we hope to see, but when you look at Algebra 1, and in 2023, it's heartbreaking, right? Like, look at where we were. We were at 16%, 8.7%, and then 2.9%. And 28, and if you look at 2025, now we're at 28.1, 31.4, and 15.7. It's also so very hard to create relevance for our high school students in taking that assessment. They've come through our system since grade 3, taking state assessments, and they get to high school and then they why does this test matter to me? What am I getting from this test? And so we have been leading student-centered conversations about we want you to lead in excellence in everything, like sitting down with a child and saying, we want you to do your very best in everything that you have. And it's no different. I know that you may not see your results until, gosh, in the mail when you receive your math data, but we really, really want you to try on this assessment for our district. And so that buy-in piece also is a key factor with Algebra 1. And we're trying to change the belief about math in general. You can do math, you just have to be taught math. And we're gonna bring the best instructor to be right beside you, and we're gonna guide you in accomplishing the competencies work in math instruction.
I've always found that we miss on that, because math is something we use the rest of our lives. We may not do calculus all the time, but to work out projects like you're talking about, Tom, to know that it is a necessity and not drop it because it's frustrating or you can't do it or feel like you can't.
Well, and it's so related to success in science, honestly.
Yeah.
Because many of the questions in science are math word problems.
Well, if you don't mind, then in response to all the data that you see here, of course, and next to your binder is really a professional development plan. Because when you think about the data, you think about how are we going to work in changing teachers' practices in the craft of teaching, and what do we need to ensure that our teachers are developed in to change these numbers that we're seeing. And so I have here the professional development plan for 25-26, which really just outlines for you on page 2 and 3, really our core learning focus. And so I'm just going to walk you through the core learning focus. This is also on our district website as well. And this is presented to the board and then approved by the board. But you can see that we spent a lot of time this summer in partnership with the Northwest RPDC understanding data-driven instruction. The success that we're seeing at Edison, the success that we're seeing in these pockets of classrooms and buildings, you'll see that we spent, our teachers, 109 of them, spent time down at Empower Youth, rethinking assessment. The other pieces that you'll see are a lot to do with literacy. You'll see that our early learning even supports us in that work with their ELK curriculum. And that is a state-approved DESE preschool curriculum that we use. We want to ensure sometimes districts are notorious for not continuing on with the learning or not ensuring that our new teachers who are brought into a system are trained in those curricular pieces. And DLO has been such amazing about ensuring that all of her teachers walking into that understand the core components for the ELK. You'll see we brought the University of Florida in support of our science of reading. You know, it's a critical piece in this Northwest area. I have many districts reach out to us and want to partake right along with this in this U-Fly program. This past year we supported Stewartsville and Maryville and a number of other districts that came and learned right beside us. They are also using that science of reading approach, the U-Fly approach, in their K-1-2 classrooms with their Tier 1. You can see our new curricular resource at K-6. So on top of understanding the science of reading, one of the big things that I know Dr. Adams, our instructional coaches, and I saw is that we had gone too far in personalizing instruction. And so when a student was not reading on level, we were going to give them the reading level passage that they were testing on. Unfortunately, that's not how that works. We want to provide equity and grade level instruction and standards. And that ensures that you put grade level text in front of our kids. It needs to be, if you are a second grader in the classroom, I need to be reading second grade material. I can't be reading kindergarten material. I'm not going to grow if I don't have that second grade material in there. And so how do you do that when you have 13 elementary schools? It's easy, like Michael said earlier. It's so easy to me to run to the 4 middle schools and the ELA and the math and connect with those 2 teachers that are teaching that subject. But it's a system at the elementary level. And so DESE had released the 3 core resources and said, these are approved by DESE. We are stamping the approval that a district uses this, we have vetted this resource to ensure this is going to impact your literacy work. And so a lot of learning right now on this benchmark advance. And so it is, when you go into the first quarter, students will have a unit 1 and a unit 2. And in unit 1, you have a fiction unit. And unit 2, you have a nonfiction unit. And they're the same reading passages no matter what building you go to. Now, we're working on the implementation of that. We've purchased that. We need it to be in practice. And that's where our principles come into play. Ensuring that that resource is used as the core resource in the ELA curriculum, that literacy structure.
Yeah. Question. So if we have a kid in first or second grade and they're not able to comprehend or understand those passages and it gets to the end of the year, what are we doing with those kids?
We are scaffolding and providing strategies for reaching that grade level. And so that may be, I'm reading to them that passage. That may be, probably Dr. Adams could speak more to the elementary side.
Depends on the skill deficit for the individual student and what we do, but we differentiate our instruction for them. So they still continue to get tier 1 whole group instruction at grade level, but then if we need to make modifications or provide additional supports throughout the school day, that comes in a variety of ways. So they might have additional small group, they might have a reading group with a reading specialist, it could be push in or pull out. There's tutoring, a lot of different things that we do, but we monitor those kids. That's one of the reasons for the PLC process, is we know who those kids are before we get to the end of the school year, so we're already intervening. It could be anything from just providing a little bit of scaffolding to maybe they need a referral for a 504 or special education services.
And I don't know what the policy is per se, but I guess my question is like at what point do we say you're not on level, we've done these other things, it's probably best that we don't advance you to the next grade level. Like when are we doing those kinds of things, or are we doing those kinds of things?
We do that every year. If we are looking at delaying a decision about promotion, we have started having those conversations as early as October in parent-teacher conferences. We make that decision typically in March and share that with parents at parent-teacher conferences. Sometimes we say we just really need them for a little extra dose in summer school, and we think we can get them over the hump. But it's so dependent, some kids, a retention, it depends on what it's due to. It might be due to a disability. It might be due to chronic absenteeism. That's another ballgame.
And I just ask because I see a lot of kids in my office. One of the things a lot of times is reading, and they get really anxious because they can't read, or they get really nervous because they feel like are really sad because they're not as smart as the other kids. And so, some of these kids are in upper grade levels, and I'm thinking, why are you in this grade level and you're still not reading?
Yeah.
Like I don't. And so that's, I guess, where that question was coming from for me, just trying to understand what the process is.
If we are looking at a retention, we like to use a research-based tool called the Lights Retention Scale, and so we use that to provide input for
the Lights Retention Scale.
The Lights Retention Scale, and so that helps us make decisions about retention. But reading is so developmental, the continuum. We like to try to box things into grade levels. And unfortunately, the reading continuum doesn't always work like that. You might have a student that grows really fast at the beginning of the continuum and then slows down a little bit and then picks up a little more. You might have a student that it's just not clicking, and then all of a sudden something happens in April and boom, they're readers. So and I've done a lot of work with elementary principals about what are the skills along that reading continuum. It is not linear, like check onto the next skill, check on it. They have to be able to do a variety of skills all at the same time, and so really drilling down to find out what skill it is that we need improvement on has been important for us. And so we have been using a tool called DIBBLS, which is our progress monitoring tool, that helps us zero in on the exact skill deficit. So it's a variety of things that we try to provide. Sometimes, there's a lot of research about retention, and we've read that too. And so sometimes when you retain kids, you're increasing the chance of a student not graduating high school as well. There's so many factors. It's a big decision that our teams take a lot of time to make. And sometimes it's beneficial and sometimes it's not. It's just so individualized.
But I do like the idea that you challenge them with the grade level material.
Yeah.
Because if they're not challenged, they stay. So there has to be some kind of challenge to encourage better comprehension or something to move them along instead of keeping them down at first grade level if they're a fourth grader. Something's got to challenge them. An intervention would do the same. But I like that material is presented because some just need that challenge to progress.
And Ms. Miller, you're speaking my language here because when I taught 8th grade ELA, a lot of the independent books that kids were reading were written below grade level. And so I have to ensure that I'm providing on grade level instruction to them. In my classroom, we call them holiday or vacation books. They don't require lots of thinking, right? You're just reading for a story and you're just taking in the story. I ensured that there was complex text in front of you, where the story may not start out as a beginning, middle, and end. The story may start out in a flashback. And in that flashback, as a reader, you have to figure that out. Like, oh gosh, this is not the beginning of the story. This is a flashback at the beginning of the story, and I have to think about this different than if it was an easier read for me.
Yes.
I've got a question. Do you have a number for retention? For
I
grade school
don't.
level, like how many?
I don't have that
Has it
right here
changed
with me
for-
off the top of my head. It's different every year,
Yeah.
and it depends on the school.
Does it stay along the same lines?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we try to do everything we can to prevent a retention. And so we really try to utilize summer school to try, and we've been talking about possibilities for that and strategies for that, how we can even improve that transitional time and stop that summer regression. Because the kids take a break from school and then they come back and like, you have this at the end of the year, what happened? I don't have the numbers with me right now, I don't, but they're
No, I'm just curious. I didn't
it's
know.
not a large number, I can tell you that. It's not large. It's not significant.
And what Dr. Adams is speaking to, those 5 pillars of reading, we've been providing that learning for our teachers through the program letters. It starts out with volume 1, and we spend a whole year in volume 1 and understanding basically the PA, the phonics, and the fluency, those 3 key pieces, the 5 pillars. And then in volume 2 is where you get more about the vocabulary, how do kids develop vocabulary, what does comprehension look like? What are those skills for comprehension? What does it mean when I'm a good reader? What do good readers do to understand text? And it's not a secret. They ask questions, they connect to text to their own life, and so they walk through that learning for a whole year. And you can see that on our professional development plan there. It's an opt-in model right now, but we're to the point now where we've saturated this entire district, and it's the individuals that have been kind of the most resistant and said, I'm just going to see if this goes away. They're partaking in the learning right now, right along. They're like, okay, I need to get in part of this learning because the state has made it a priority.
So it's not necessarily a requirement then for
No,
all
we tried. I was a teacher when we tried to require, and you know how things go when you require. Sometimes it doesn't work out in our favor, and so we approached it as like, we're just going to offer this on our professional learning days. They were offering it off of our professional days. The problem is the substitute crisis caused a lot of our teachers that are at Lindbergh and Hosea that they just couldn't get out because they didn't have substitutes.
Yeah.
And those were the teachers that we most needed to be at that learning. And so we placed I'm grateful for Jane Jackson and the partnership with our PDC because they provided that learning right along in our district days, and so they don't have to miss anything. That is their growth plan. That is their professional learning for that entire year. And it's paid for by the state. So it's a state scholarship the state is paying for.
I'll also jump in. We did for early learning.
Yes.
There's letters for early childhood, basically. And so we were able to get all of our staff trained, all of our teachers, and it was optional the first year. The second year, we were like, okay, whoever didn't go, we'd like for you to go, and so they have attended. So it's nice that we were able to get that foundation even before the elementary for letters.
The other professional learning pieces we see are about deepening the content knowledge of our teachers, particularly at the secondary level. And so you'll see that in secondary math and secondary ELA, secondary science and secondary social studies. We're really leaning on in the secondary electives right now, the real world learning, and that piece, the Success Ready Network and those market value assets. We're taking them to other sites and showing them what other programs other districts have used. And on November 3rd, we get to go to Winnetonka. And Winnetonka has set up the college and career pathways for our secondary electives. And we're going to go visit and check that out later. I briefly wanted to show you these individuals on the next page 5. Those are instructional coaches. They make so many great systems approach to our district. They are the catalyst why things get done in the classroom. They go in and model. They teach. We ask them to really target classrooms that would need the extra support. Tabitha is really good about looking at data and placing an instructional coach where we notice some gaps in data. I can tell you that's not the only thing. When I was in the classroom, I worked with an instructional coach every single year because I wanted to get better at my craft. And so that instructional coach was the external piece that enabled me to grow and continue to grow. Any questions about the professional learning plan there? So the last 15 minutes here, I wanted to take you through. So you saw that all the learning that we're doing. So now what are we doing in our classroom? So this is all the professional learning that we're conducting through the year. Please take this with you and process it and bring back some questions. But we did make significant changes. It's the assessment piece that we made some significant changes in. And you'll find something like this. The 9-12, some of you have a 9-12 assessment calendar, some of you have a K-6 assessment calendar, some of you have 6-8. I just wanted to show you a sample of this. This is what we led in the summer with teachers. Our teachers got together and said these are the best dates to assess our students in scope and sequence with our curriculum. And so our teachers, and of course, you're going to find that they generally fall at the end of a quarter. That they feel like they've taught a quarter, it's time to measure where kids are in their learning. This is a piece that allows our district leadership team to get some insight into where we could potentially end up in May. And so these numbers that you're seeing on this page, we just don't get them in May, that we get them in October, we get them in January, and then we would get them at the end of March here. The other piece you see is, on that next page, is being in a lot of classrooms, we also noticed that testing environment was kind of all over the place. And we wanted to set up a consistent SJSD protocol for what does it look like to assess in a St. Joe School District classroom. And those were a lot of the questions from our new teachers and working with our new teachers. Are there expectations for me when I go to lead this assessment, whether that be iReady, whether that be Mastering Connect? And so yes, we provided a checklist for them. And so what you'll see is you have things that you have to do in the setup and preparation as an educator. These are what you're expected to do. These are the instructions and modifications that Dr. Anderson and Dr. Schultz would want you to provide for the students that have special program modifications and accommodations. you flip over, you'll see the monitoring and supervision. What does that look like for a teacher to actively monitor and supervise during the assessment process when a child is testing? Addressing issues, and so you're always going to have things pop up, right? Because the assessment's on there. And so as a new teacher, where do I go to if I'm in the classroom and I have 30 kids sitting in front of me? How do I seek support if all of a sudden this happens? And so what you'll see is you are to address technical difficulties. Here's a quick number. They are the most helpful individuals that will help you. And you can issue a tech ticket or an instructional coach. Grab your building instructional coach and say, I need help. I don't know what happened. And then you'll see the reflection and adjustment. And so after you assess, what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to reflect on the data that I see as a classroom teacher. And then I'm also supposed to adjust my instruction. I just don't keep going on. If students didn't get the learning, you can't keep moving on. You've got to think about the reteach that you're noticing in student data. I've always said if 80% of your kids get a question right, you have really strong Tier 1 instruction. That means your classroom instruction is strong. If 19% of your kids got the question right, we don't have strong Tier 1 instruction. And so we have to look at that specific standard or that specific question and figure out and teach what we didn't teach the first time. And so in the past, our assessment has in grades, I call it the high school readiness, in grades 3 to 8, has been adaptive. And so what that means is that if I test at a 4th grade level and I'm an 8th grader, I'm going to get a 4th grade assessment. Now I can build, but typically this progress after so many years, we weren't seeing the growth that we had hoped to see. And so what we hope to see, what you guys have all shared, is you saw a lot of growth in 5th grade science. You saw a lot of growth in math. What did you do in those subjects? Secondary, middle level? Michael said the middle level. Well, we used a different assessment, and we used this assessment that was on grade level. And so we're trying to replicate that right now in our grades 3 really through 8th grade, all content areas. Are we going to see the growth that we expect, that we've been seeing at that middle level? So I wanted to show you, so we brought the teacher teams together, and you have a sheet in there. At 6:25, I sat down with our 4th grade math team, and I said, what standards do you want to test on the first one? What standards do you want to test on the second one? But you got to understand that last test is comprehensive. It means you're going to get all the standards. And so they decided, the teachers had some input, and they decided what standards they wanted to test. And you can see those standards. Then what you'll see is just what Dr. Adams shared on that next page. Language arts, you can't standardize. We'd like to standardize it, we can't. And so when I look at a 3rd grade assessment, guess what the first question is probably going to be? What's the main idea? When I go to English 2 test, it's probably going to ask, what's the central idea? Basically, what's that main idea? What they share is the text changes for the student or the scholar. And so when you're a 3rd grader, you're going to get 3rd grade reading material. When you're in English 2, you're going to get English 2 reading material. And so we're going to see how you handle 3rd grade reading material, and then we're going to see how you handle English 2 material. And so this is Mastery Connect. This was the explanation that we shared with our teachers because that was a change of thinking. They're not going to get what they've been personalized to. They're going to get equity. We're going to ensure that students have access to on-grade level text. The next couple pages I want to show you is we test on a computer screen, which I hate. I wish the state would go back to paper pencil. I think there's so much research behind paper pencil. And so what we requested is that when you take the math test, you can see now that we provided teachers with a graphic organizer, and students are expected to work out each problem. They're not just a click. They're to go to number 1, look at number 1, write number 1, and then solve the problem that way. And so this is the first time that we're carrying this out district-wide, so that at the end of the assessment, the teacher can get their hands on this, and they can see the gaps that they're making, instead of, if I was a teacher right now, I'm just seeing they chose B, and I have no idea why they chose B. And so this piece, this graphic organizer, allows a teacher to go back through. We've missed question number 6. 30-some% of our kids got it. And I got to see what were my mathematicians doing that they didn't get that question. And so you can look at how the kids solve that problem and look at what you need to reteach. The other piece I wanted to show you, and I did get permission from Master Connect, so you'll see here, we shared with teachers ahead of time how many questions were on the test and what the standard was, or the learning intention that was going to be assessed for each question. And so the sample I have is a English 2. You may have different samples, but you'll see the numbers down the left-hand side equals the number of test questions on that assessment. You will also see the grade level standard. You will see the difficulty of the question. How hard is that question? Is it a low? Is it a medium or high question? And then you will see that DOK. And DOK just means that depth of knowledge. Depth of knowledge, number 1, is an easy question. It's an easier question. The depth of knowledge, question number 3, is a little bit tougher. It's more rigorous. It's going to be harder. And so the data that we're getting back right now indicates, we're doing pretty strong on DOK 1. They can do basic recall. It's when kids have to critically think about things that we're seeing that we need to push, which then allows us to have conversations with teachers about how far are you getting in your classroom instruction with pushing DOK 3? Are you providing those questions that ask students to move at a higher level? I also put behind there, I wanted you to see, so you'll have a sample of a language arts, and then just a sample of questions, just so that you can tell. The other thing I love about this assessment is it does measure writing as well. And because we have that on the state assessment. We have a measurement that we assess with writing. And so what you'll see is we have identified that research, the skills of research, are something that our kids struggle on. And this assessment measures research for us. And so one of the questions I have here in front of me, a student is writing a research paper on the impact of technology on education. What pieces of information should be included in the paper? And then you have choices there the student needs to make. It's a pretty high DOK level. Then you'll see the science. I provided a science piece as well, just so that you can see what are students being asked to partake in science. And then I also provided an algebra. Feedback from teachers, because we just finished up the testing. The algebra test was the longest test. It had 32 questions. But that algebra has a lot, that class has a lot of standards. There are a lot of standards in algebra. And so what we're doing is we're taking that teacher feedback now, and we're going to make concessions on the second test. And we're going to say, can you shorten this up just a little bit? Because we don't want to test our kids. That was the other piece. We want to have a snapshot of where kids are, be able to get this done in 2 days, so that teachers can process the data and move on. You don't want to test kids all the time.
That was going to be my question.
Right.
Like the tension, I'm not an educator.
Yeah.
But it seems like as a parent, sometimes there can be a tension of, oh, we're testing again. And, but everything's data driven.
Yeah.
So we have to do that. But
No. Yeah.
how is there like some education, I guess, with teachers, like teaching the content versus the tests? And does that tension exist, I guess?
Yeah, it does. It does. And what we're finding is that we're looking at the test questions and saying, particularly what standard is this test addressing? And then going back to a teacher's understanding of the content of that specific. And that's why I shared one of the key pieces in our secondary right now is firming up that content knowledge, so that a teacher knows, okay, this is really, the thinking behind, I'm going to use English because I know that, how to conjugate verbs or something. And so you're right. And that was my fear. Because as a classroom teacher, one of the things that I worried about is I want to be able to give an assessment pretty quickly, and then I need to instruct on what I'm seeing from that assessment. And so through this process, I've led many conversations. Guess what? The difference between iReady and this assessment in grades 3 to 8, 2 days and you're done.
Because it was taking about a week,
Yes.
right, with iReady?
Yes, it was. And so, and partly that was because it was adaptive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it was adaptive, and so as a kid, sometimes I got excited when a kid took a long time. But sometimes the kid's just agonizing over the test, and they're just sitting there and they're like, oh, this is gonna go on and on. And students would ask me, how many more questions do I have? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
So this you know,
Yeah.
how many questions I have. That's
you
nice.
do. You do. And so one of the mindful things I was really thankful for is that on the government test, there were only 15 questions. So you had probably one class period. The Algebra 2 test was 12 questions. And so we're just shortening these these assessments up so that we can use this data, but not over-assess our kids. I've talked a lot, but I wanted to share the processes, and this is a process that if you go back to our academic department plan, that we've made a major shift with this year. And this is you know, when teachers talk about we're leading a lot of change, it's the right change. It's the right change. And so just hang with us here. Once you get used to this change, you're going to see some great pieces of reflection and adjustments to instruction. And that's, as we kind of close out here, I want your guys' thinking. So I showed you kind of this, where we are with teachers, where we first started with data, then we looked at the professional learning that we're providing for teachers, and then we looked at like, how are we as a team measured, because we can't be at every classroom. So this is a high lens that we're looking at and saying, what supports do we need to provide? I would love to hear your thinking on next commitments and reflection for this academic service team. As you think about the move from assessment to really what McKinsey just like led us to, which is the instruction. And that is what I love as a teacher, is teaching. And that's what teachers, that's why they got into this, is teaching and learning. So what aspects of our academic infrastructure would you guys like to look at next? Based off the data, based off the professional learning, and based off this assessment piece, what would you guys like to see at our next academic committee meeting?
I would like to see the data on first, second year teachers.
Okay.
And what buildings, like how the percentage of that and how it correlates with the test scores, as well as, like I said, the staff turnover. And years of high turnover, the next year we're having low testing scores. Tagging on to what you were just saying a minute ago, which I know this would be taken maybe with a grain of salt, because when you survey, it's not always 100% accurate, but like, do you survey students by chance? Like, you know, when you took a college course and like at the end of your course, they send you a little thing, like, do you feel like your teacher responded and answered your questions, like presented material in ways you could understand, or that you had the things you needed for your do we like survey our high school students at all?
That's a great question. Dr. Reed, I'm going to tell you, after each assessment I gave in the classroom, I personally made a survey from a classroom level. I don't think we lead. Kitty, do you know?
They take the climate survey, and it does ask questions like, do you have someone in your building that cares for you? Do you? And it does have some things that would lead to that. They're not as detailed in those as they are at the collegiate level, where they say, did they take the amount of time? Did they use the resource? And those types of questions.
Because if we had that data and like those, which, and again, I have teens and I work with teens in my practice, so I know sometimes it's not always taken seriously, but if we had some data like that that would maybe correlate with like maybe some of our high schools where scores in certain areas are not on par, and those students are saying, no, I don't feel like my questions were answered, or no, I don't feel like I had what I needed. Like that would maybe be another piece to tie in to like better support the students in those schools.
Thank you. For
just as a thought.
Yeah, thank you for saying that.
And this is a hard one, but I think some things, I don't know what we do relative to teacher evaluation. You know, we're
Okay.
talking a lot here about student evaluation. But I think that somewhere in there regarding, and I know we're doing that for some areas, but I don't know if we're doing it for instruction and knowledge of content and things like that. I mean, when I look at some of these, even some of these questions, I think, well, I'd have to think about that answer. Maybe I wouldn't know it. And I want to make sure that our teachers, they're certified, but do they have, are they lacking any competency in terms of their ability to give instruction? That's kind of a hard question, but you know, we're not just measuring the students. We've got to say there's probably a correlation between the teacher's mastery of the information and what they're able to pass on.
Thank you, Mr. Richmond, and that is exactly what I'd love to share with this team is that teacher evaluation piece during this time. So, hey, but Nancy, any thoughts? What direction you guys would like to go to, look at, study?
I don't know how you would do it, but parental involvement, I know, is a huge barrier. And I know we can talk about it, but until we finally find something that engages parents or the caregivers, it's going to be an uphill battle.
Thank you. Tamara?
Yes.
Anything?
I think what I was thinking is your goal is to get an additional 7%. I'd like to maybe understand the strategy behind that. How do you plan to get to that 7%? This was all great information and it gives me a lot of confidence in what you're doing. But I noticed in grade school, the top 4 are always the top 4. Where is the sweet spot, or what do you do to get this building to rise, or are there target buildings that you want to go from a certain point to a certain point? So I'd be interested in seeing that.
We just had that discussion the other day at our Instructional Leaders Network, and so we had our principals, and I said, this is the target for the district, but you have to have personal targets for your building. And I need to be able to walk into any building and know what that target is, and the teacher should be able to share with me, where is the target in your building? And if they can't communicate that, we've got a problem.
And I would think those building targets would then roll up to the 7%. Because how do you get to the 7% without the building? But I'm just interested in just kind of more of the numbers.
Yes, definitely. We could dive into building improvement plans and look at that.
Because I think a couple people pointed out that there was great movement with several schools, and so you can look at that and say, well, this school has a lot of opportunity to move from this point to this point.
Thank you for sharing that. Any last direction for our academic service team? I could present on lots and lots of things, but I want to lead with what you guys want to learn more about in the St. Joe School District in the work of academics. It's very complex.
And I know it's kind of beyond the scope of this committee, but following up on Cassandra's question about new teachers or teacher, I know you have strategies for those too, so if you think about this all the time, it might be a good idea if you say there was this turnover and this is our HR strategy or retention strategy, so we understand it's just not poof, they're gone, that you are working on those areas.
Well, and I know that program, I can't think of what it's called, and I should know because my daughter's in the Pathways program. The Grow Your Own, yes, thank you. So in the Grow Your Own program, I know part of that is teachers being allowed to do their, I don't want to say skip their student teaching, but essentially that's kind of what it is, and they're going into the classroom and teaching. I come from a medical background. I could not imagine as a nurse leaving the classroom and then going to the bedside and taking care of somebody. So I wonder too, how many of these teachers are opting out of that student teaching and doing this, and then what detriment to them? Because I understand the appeal, believe me, I've been in college, I've struggled through that before, it's hard, but I think of all the valuable information that I gained through my orientation, and like having a bunch of family members that are educators, when I asked them, like, could you imagine skipping your student teaching? They were like, no. And even my friends, some of my friends that are teachers, they were like, yeah, no, I would never. I learned so much in my student teaching. I wonder if that also is negatively affecting any of this.
I'm the complete opposite. I would much rather hands-on learn as we go, rather than sit in the class, because I'm not gonna take it in, I'm bored.
Well, and
So I am the opposite.
I agree there is some hands-on learning that is absolutely invaluable, but at the same time, there's certain things that you don't learn in a classroom that you only gain through some experience, and having like a knowledgeable tenured teacher who can help like guide you through some of the, because in your student teaching, you are doing teaching, but you have that experienced certified teacher right there with you, like watching what you're doing and giving you pointers the whole time, like, hey, that was great, but you know, consider X, Y, Z. And so when you go straight into the classroom, you don't get any of that. You don't get that instantaneous feedback or that additional support. I wonder about that piece of it as well.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I just met with Becky Jones, who's the instructor over there with Pathways, and I shared with her our instructional resources, so U-Fly, Benchmark Advance, the Ready Math, and said, let's go ahead and start training our teachers that are in your program right now in these core resources, so that when they are placed in the classroom, they're familiar with the core resource that we're going to be using in the classroom.
I do think that program is wonderful.
It
It
is.
really makes young kids excited, like
Yeah.
kids who think they want to teach, and then getting that experience. I know it's been a big deal for a lot of the teens that I know, so.
I appreciate you guys' letting us share from the academic service lens. I'm going to take all your feedback. I'll send out kind of a next steps for us based off of what I've heard. And I'm grateful that you guys are committed to this committee and providing some insights for us. So it's 4:08. I went 8 minutes over. I apologize. But grab a cookie, your water, and hopefully all the candy with you.